Okay, so get this right. You're deep in Africa, it's hot, it's wild, and you stumble into this hidden cave. And inside, a frozen, dead white guy. And he's holding a map, but not just any map, one that supposedly leads to King Solomon's mines.
Sounds like a movie.
Totally. And that scene, that's what kicked off this global obsession with adventure stories way back in 1885.
Yeah.
All thanks to Ryder Haggard and his novel, King Solomon's Mines.
It really is incredible how one book, and really Haggard's own life, kind of set the stage for, so much of what we still see in pop culture. I mean, think about it. Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider, heck, even Black Panther has threads that go back to this story.
So today we're going deep, deep into the life of this guy, Ryder Haggard.
Yeah.
This isn't just about a book. It's about understanding the man himself, the world he lived in, and how all of that kind of poured into King Solomon's mines.
Exactly. We're talking British Empire, the scramble for Africa, and how Haggard took real history and made it into this thrilling fiction.
And what's so crazy is that Haggard, he wasn't just some armchair adventurer.
No.
He was born in England, right? 8th of 10 kids. Family wasn't exactly rolling in it. But at 19, boom, he shipped off to South Africa.
Can you imagine that journey? I mean, the culture shock alone.
Totally. And we actually have his diaries from that time.
Really?
It wasn't just a tourist. No, he was working for the lieutenant governor of Natal. So he's seeing firsthand, like, the tensions between the British, the Boers, and the native Africans.
It's like front row seats to history in the making, isn't it?
Totally. And here's where it gets really wild. He actually reads the annexation proclamation of the Transvaal.
Wow.
I mean, that's a huge historical event.
Yeah.
But then years later, what happens? It's reversed because of the Boer Rebellion, because British politics shift. Can you imagine the disillusionment?
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just some adventure for him. It got personal.
So you have this young Haggard, right? He's absorbing everything. The landscape, the Zulu warriors, the political mess. And he's realizing that this whole empire thing, it's complicated.
Yeah, it makes you really appreciate the depth and detail in his writing.
Totally. It's like it's all there, just waiting to be uncovered.
And that's what I love about this deep dive. We're not just reading King Solomon's Mines as this old classic. We're peeling back the layers.
Exactly.
This is about a guy who romanticized Africa, but also he really struggled with the realities of colonialism, and it's all right there in his work.
Okay, so picture this.
Yeah.
Haggard goes back to England, right?
Yeah.
Tries a few things. Law, for one. But nothing sticks.
Yeah, I can see him not quite fitting him back home.
And then, bam, that twist of fate. He's on a train with his brother, and they're chatting about the hottest book at the time, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson.
Pirates, Bob buried treasure.
The whole 9 yards. And Haggard, well, he was a competitive guy.
Yeah.
So he bets his brother that he can write a better adventure story.
Oh, I love that. A little sibling rivalry sparks a masterpiece.
So what does he do? Does he lock himself away for months planning this epic tale?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
No. He writes King Solomon's Mines in 6 weeks.
6 weeks? That's insane.
I know, right? But wait, there's a catch. The publishers, they reject it.
Really? Why? Too fantastical.
It was the violence. They thought it was too much. Like, even for today's standards, some of those scenes are intense.
Especially for Victorian England. That's saying something.
So did he change it? Did he tone it down?
I bet he stuck to his guns.
He did. He found a publisher who took a chance on him. And not only that, they went all out with the marketing. They claimed it was the most amazing book ever written.
Yeah, that's confidence. Or maybe a little bit of crazy.
Right. But did it live up to the hype?
I guess we'll find out. Let's just say it blew up. It totally caught the public's imagination. You got to remember, this is right when the scramble for Africa was happening. European powers, they were dividing up the continent. And here comes this book, promising adventure, mystery, riches beyond your wildest dreams, all hidden in Africa.
It was like the perfect escape, wasn't it?
Totally. It tapped right into the desires and anxieties of the time.
It's crazy how it hit at the right time. Like, people were hungry for stories about the unknown.
Right.
But King Solomon's Mines, it wasn't just like a one-off hit. Didn't it create a bunch of those tropes that we still see in adventure stories today?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like Haggard, he made the blueprint for the genre. You've got your lost civilizations, your treacherous journeys, daring escapes, the white guy who somehow knows more than the natives.
Right.
Oh, and of course, tons of treasure just waiting to be found.
It's all there.
It's all there in King Solomon's Mines.
So he's kind of the reason for all those cliches we see.
Yeah, but those cliches, they had to start somewhere.
True, true. But let's dig a little deeper into that lost world thing. It's not just about finding a hidden kingdom, right?
It's not.
There's more to it. Like how that idea gets mixed up with how people saw Africa and the whole colonial mindset.
Yeah, exactly. It's complicated.
Okay, unpack that for me. What's so, like, problematic about the lost world, especially in King Solomon's minds?
Okay, well, think about the setting. Haggard, he uses this myth of Ophir, which was, the biblical source of Solomon's wealth, and he connects it to Great Zimbabwe.
Wait, Great Zimbabwe, like the real place with those incredible stone structures.
The one and only. And this connection, it shows what a lot of people believed back then, this like very Eurocentric view,
Yes.
that Africans, they couldn't possibly have built something so amazing.
Like they needed help.
Right, like they needed some European savior to come in and unlock their potential. It's messed up, really.
So it's not just a fun adventure story.
No.
It's saying that Africa is incomplete. Like it needs guidance from the outside.
Exactly, and that's the problem with the whole Lost World thing. It keeps that colonial story alive.
Yeah.
The one that says Africa is a mystery waiting to be solved by Europeans instead of recognizing, the amazing history and culture that was already there.
It's wild, though, how all of this was happening in real life.
Yeah.
While Haggard was writing, like you had those famous explorers,
Yeah.
Burton, Speke, Stanley,
Yeah.
going off to uncharted places, claiming to discover things that had been there forever.
Oh, yeah.
And people loved their stories, just like King Solomon's mines.
Totally. There was this huge desire for adventure, for conquering the unknown, for like claiming ownership of these supposedly blank spaces on the map.
Even though they weren't blank at all.
Exactly. And Haggard, he nailed it. He got right into that. He even modeled Alan Quatermain after real explorers. Guys like Frederick Selous and Joseph Thompson, big game hunters.
So Quatermain, he's like a mix of all these like larger-than-life figures, all the ruggedness, the daring, and let's be honest, some pretty brutal methods.
Right. But Haggard, he makes Quatermain complicated too. He's not just some fearless hero. He's a guy dealing with loss, disillusioned by, all the greed behind colonialism. There's a moral struggle in him, which makes him more interesting.
It's almost like Haggard, he's trying to figure out the whole empire thing through his characters, even while he's writing this adventure story.
Right, he's grappling with it.
But what about the women? I mean, we've talked about the explorers and the lost kingdoms. Where do they fit into all this?
That's a really good question, and it tells us a lot about Haggard and about the world he lived in. Let's dive into that next.
Okay, so women in Haggard's stories. From what I've read, it's a little all over the place, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. His female characters, they kind of fall into two buckets. You got the beautiful, innocent victims, and then the powerful, sometimes kind of scary ones.
So like damsel in distress or evil sorceress, like those old fairy tales.
Exactly. And that definitely shows how limited women's roles were back then in Victorian times. Like, take Fulada, for example, the love interest in King Solomon's mines. She's gorgeous, totally devoted to Quatermain, but then she dies tragically.
And if I remember right, Quatermain's almost relieved when she dies, as if like a relationship with an African woman would be too taboo or something.
Yeah, that says a lot about race and social stuff back then. But let's talk about those powerful women, like Gagul, the witch in King Solomon's mines.
Yeah, she's creepy.
Right. She's old, grotesque almost. Like Haggard took all those colonial fears about Africa and put them into her.
She's like the ultimate other, right? Old, powerful, connected to this land that the Europeans are trying to take. And she uses her knowledge to mess with everyone.
Exactly. And the way he describes her physically, it plays into those racist stereotypes that were, everywhere back then. But here's the thing about Gagul. She's also fascinating. Cunning. She holds the key to the treasure that everyone wants.
So she's like a villain, but also you kind of need her. It's like she represents how the colonizers saw Africa. Alluring, but dangerous, full of potential, but mysterious.
That's a really good point. And that duality, it's even stronger in another female character, Aisha from She.
Oh yeah, she who must be obeyed. Even the name, it's like super powerful, little scary.
Exactly. And Aisha, it's like Gagul turned up to 11. She's this white queen, right? Who's figured out how to live forever, and she rules over a lost African kingdom with an iron fist.
Hold on, a white queen. In Africa, that's kind of weird, even for Haggard.
It is. And scholars, they argue about it. Some say it shows Haggard was anxious about women in power, especially with Queen Victoria on the throne. I mean, She came out in 1887, right in the middle of Victoria's reign.
So you're saying there's like a connection between this white queen in Africa who's super powerful and the Queen of England.
It's worth thinking about, right? And it shows how Haggard was uneasy about women in power. That comes up a lot in his work.
It's interesting, though, that Aisha's not just powerful, she's also beautiful.
Yeah.
Like Haggard couldn't imagine a woman being strong, A&D, not attractive.
Yeah. And that just shows how limited people's views were back then. Women, they were either beautiful and pure or ugly and manipulative.
No in between. No normal, complex women.
Not really. His women are more like symbols, for good or evil.
Which is a shame, because it means we miss out on more, relatable female
Yeah.
characters. But even with those problems, Haggard's writing, it definitely made a mark. What do you think? What's his biggest legacy?
Oh, there's no denying his influence. Writers, filmmakers, even comic book people, they've all been inspired by him. All those stories with lost civilizations, brave explorers, hidden treasures, it all goes back to Haggard.
But we can't forget the bad stuff, right? The racism, the sexism, the way he reinforces colonial ideas.
Yeah, it's not about pretending those things aren't there. It's about understanding them, appreciating his storytelling, but also seeing the harmful stuff.
Oh, and you mentioned a connection to, like, the Marvel movies, right?
Oh, yeah. Remember Black Panther?
Yeah.
Wakanda, the Lost Kingdom, the technology, the warriors.
You're saying that's like Kukuana land from King Solomon's Mines?
Well, not exactly the same, but there are similarities. Both stories use that lost world idea, that
Yeah.
somewhere in Africa there's this powerful hidden kingdom. But Black Panther, it turns that old idea upside down.
It's saying Africa doesn't need outsiders to be great.
Right. Wakanda is self-sufficient, advanced. They chose to stay hidden. It shows what stories can do when they take those old narratives and, reclaim them. It's like Black Panther is having a conversation with King Solomon's Mines, taking its influence, but also challenging it.
Yeah, that's cool.
It reminds us that stories can be about the past and the future. They shape how we see the world.
That's a great point to wrap things up on, don't you think? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into H. Rider Haggard and King Solomon's Mines.
It's been fun.
It has. We hope you learned something new. And remember, stories matter, so pay attention to the ones you hear and the ones you tell. And, use your imagination to create a future where exploring is about understanding, not conquering.
Well said. Until next time.